Good afternoon, one. Good afternoon, all, and good afternoon, Dunedin City Councillor Sophie Barker. Sophie, good afternoon.
Kia ora, good afternoon. It's good because we're inside and not outside.
Yeah, and Dunedin at the moment, she's pretty shitty, isn't she, out there?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, thanks for joining us. For people who aren't aware of what this is, because often we do a late night conversation here in BHN, this is a bit of a Dunedin only special. If you're outside Dunedin, you can still watch. You're welcome to. I'm not banning you. But we thought that for the upcoming local body election, we'd like to get involved. And one of the ways we get involved is to talk about it. And so we've got basically all the mayoralty candidates coming on, although there was a hiccup yesterday with someone not responding to me, and that didn't therefore come together. We may repick that up at the end of the season. We'll see what happens. But coming on and having a chat with us, I guess, about life, the universe, everything, and local body politics. And that's where you come in, Sophie. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, good fun, eh? Yeah, look, the first question I wanted to ask you, I think, was really kind of non-DCC or non-mayoralty. Is your family owns Larnac Castle? Is that, I've read a few things, but they're all from like 2017. Is that still the case? And do you actually live there?
I grew up there, so our family does own it. It's in a family trust now, and my parents bought it in 1967, and I was born 2 weeks after, so I'm 55.
Wow.
If anybody has to try and do the maths. And my parents, my mum hates me saying this, but she was actually a freedom camper, so they were traveling around the South Island in a van, sleeping in the back of the van, and came upon the castle and sort of jokingly said, or wouldn't it be cool to own it? And the person was like, well, you can buy it. So they bought the castle, and I was born, 6 weeks later, sorry. And my mother woke up on her 25th birthday, 8 months pregnant, and with this huge leaky castle to look after. So it's been our family restoration project for all of those years. So
wow.
People think it was really glamorous, but no, it was cold and it was hard work and scary.
At what point in the, so 67, you said, yeah? At what point in that journey did it become this iconic tourist spot that everybody, I'm visiting Dunedin, I'll have to go to Larnac Castle. People just know it. Like from 1967, at what point did it take to get to that?
Gosh, it took decades, It's such a lot of hard work. And people said to my mum, oh, you're crazy. It can't be done. Why are you buying this place? And, you're going to fail. But it was all of that hard work over all of those years. And I took over the marketing when I was about 18 years old. So just fresh out of school at university, doing all that kind of stuff and trudging the streets of Auckland with my briefcase and my picture book. And we got the castle to the top visitor attraction with 100,000 paying visitors, and that would be in the 90s. And I guess that's when a lot of the markets opened up, because when we first started, we'd be busy 2 weeks a year. You'd be busy between Christmas and New Year and make all your money, and then the bank owned you for the rest of the year.
It's amazing. And look, I know we're kind of talking to Dunedin people about you, but for people who are outside of Dunedin who don't know, let me bring up on the screen what we're talking about. Larnac Castle. There's a Larnac Castle website. And I guess that means, your whole life. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's funny you talk about getting it in the late 60s, because I guess to a lot of us, we feel like it's always been there. But obviously not. Obviously, there was a lot of work for 20 years before it got to the point of, there you go, look at that. Holy crap. It's amazing to being like what it is now.
Yeah, it was such a lot of hard work, and I don't think that people really realize that. They see this beautiful, restored, gorgeous, historic building that, people can stay in the accommodation. We worked really hard. I mean, we traded, we didn't have any money for many years, and I remember actually signing with my stage 1 accounting, signing off the one of the loans for, I think it was $190,000 for building our lodge, and it was a really big thing to do at the time. And people were like, oh, no one will want to come and stay there, it's in the middle of nowhere, but we really built that business, and we established the castle as the icon of Dunedin. So my mum's 80 this year, or just turned 80, and it's a tribute to her. She was the person with the vision who worked so hard. I mean, this is her life's work at the castle, and we were we were part of that as well. But it was a huge thing to do, a big family sacrifice.
I guess that also,
yeah.
Yeah, I guess it also means from your, for your whole life, you've sort of been at the center of promoting Dunedin and now leading into like what you could do as potentially our next mayor. Does it feel like a natural progression? Like your life started as this person going, how do we get people to come to this location in Dunedin? And now it's more like, how do we provide for the people of Dunedin and maybe even get people to come to Dunedin as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's been I guess my life's work and my passion as well. When I said about being 18 years old with the suitcase and, cold calling people to try and tell them about Dunedin, and they didn't know about Dunedin. It was, what do we call it? The blue ribbon route, the Auckland, Rotorua, Queenstown, and that was about
Right.
it. So Dunedin had to fight for its share. So we had to go in there and really, the old saying, punch above your weight. And so I also started, before we had Tourism Dunedin, going off to Australia and going around the travel agents there. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go up to Asia with Tourism New Zealand. You're selling New Zealand first, then Dunedin, then your product. But I was
Right.
really lucky to have some great mentors. And I was really a bit bad at selling at the start because, you're like, oh, it's Dunedin and it's kind of cool, I've got this castle. And then I learned through these people to go, it is the best place to visit because you know what you've got when you've got the heritage and the Royal Albatross, unique icons that people want to come and see. It's really, really special. So that was, I guess, seminal work for me in learning how to promote Dunedin and be proud of it, because we do have this whole Scottish Presbyterian thing where we don't want to skite about stuff, but we have an amazing city and we want to share it.
Before we go through some more questions about that, is if people are watching on the internet, you're welcome to jump in and be involved. We are live streaming, so you can post a question in whatever platform it is that you're watching us on. If you are watching on Facebook, you have to accept some conditions to have your name shown. If you don't want to accept those conditions, then all you do is put your name in the comment. So like go, Sophie, semicolon, and then your comment or question, and we can use it on the show and bring it up on the screen, should that be the case. So people are welcome to join in with comments or questions, and should they be pertinent or relevant, we will bring them in. I'm interested because of your experience, I guess your whole life of tourism in Dunedin. How are we doing? How is Dunedin set up at the moment, tourism-wise, and that sort of external dollar coming in because of places like Larnac Castle?
Yeah, so not great. I mean, I keep a very sharp eye on the statistics, and we have been in the bottom third for a very long time. And that, I believe, is because we're not focused on our destination plan, which we are working through, and I have been pushing like hell to get it done. And we haven't really got that marketing proposition fine down. And I call it the wildlife and heritage capital of New Zealand, but we've had Plan D, which I was not happy about, quite frankly. It was $145,000. There's no executable strategy with KPIs. I'm really into KPIs and all that strategic planning stuff. And I feel we've lost our way a lot. But I think with our new destination plan that we will be refocusing, but we'd need to do a lot of work to make Dunedin into one of New Zealand's premier destinations, which I believe it can be. We've got everything right here.
I always tell people who travel a little bit, I'm like, if you like Melbourne, you'll probably like Wellington, and if you like Wellington, you'll probably like Dunedin. You talk about the triangle. There seems to be this triangle of, the big one is Melbourne. When I say step down, I don't even mean quality. I mean just size wise. And there's this triangle, and most people who have been to all three are like, yeah, they're all very similar. And I think you can see that in our arts culture and our, street culture and, the art that's around there on walls and the cafe culture we have. I think a lot of that's probably thanks to the university. One of the things I think about Dunedin often is we have more resources available to us than perhaps we deserve, quote unquote, because of our population size. But what happens is the students come, and because the university puts $1 billion of money into the economy a year, then we have various resources provided for the students that the rest of us who are residents here get to utilize as well. So it's a great, like you talk about punching above your weight. I think we have more and better resources for people who live here than many cities of the same size around the country, if not around sort of South Pacific especially, which I love.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. My daughter's a student at the university, her first year this year, and we're so fortunate, I guess. And I would go back to our Scottish forebears, I guess, right back in that making the first girls' school, in New Zealand, Australasia. We are a city of first, and we've invested really heavily in education. And I guess that investment back there is paying off now. And I love the students. I love the energy that they bring into the city, the new thinking, and the fact that some of them stay here as well.
Yeah. Hey, I did ask you this question before, but I don't know if I was quite clear on it. So we'll show how people how this works. Sally's asked a question as well. Sally says, "Do you still live at the castle, Sophie? And if you don't, how long did you live there for?"
Oh my gosh! So I lived at the castle, I guess, growing up, and then eventually I got married for a little bit and lived in a house in town. So now I live in a brick and tile 1940s, and I tell you what, it's great because it's not scary. When I was growing up at the castle, I used to I had my bedroom on one side. Actually, the first bedroom that I had was upstairs in the castle. So I used to have to go out of the we used to go out of the window and across the roof to go to the bathroom, so we didn't have to go past the haunted bedroom. And then the next room I was in, couldn't sleep at night because there were rats scurrying in the ceiling. And you'd meet possums on the stairs and stuff. And then the last bedroom I was in, because when I was I'd had my baby, and I used to work nights and be in charge there, but I had my bedroom on one side of the castle and my bathroom on the other side, so there were many late night scared scuttlings. So now I have an ensuite. It's great.
Hey, I'm interested though, a little tangent here about the whole haunted bedrooms. Any stories? I mean, are you someone who believes in that whole kind of there's ghosts out there? Have you experienced anything in that creepy castle?
Yeah. Well, there's sort of, I lived there for quite a long time, so there's sort of similar things that keep happening. And there was always a room that people go into, and this is the third wife's bedroom, and they would go in and then feel like someone had touched them on the back of their neck, and all their hair would stand up, and it was so often the same room. And then there was a space, because I used to do the functions late at night and I'd be in charge, so I'd be locking out, and it was always terrifying going. There was a place past the Lowe's, and it was always colder than everywhere else in the castle. I'm sort of getting stressed thinking about it. So you had to get the key in and unlock the key and make your way through, and you didn't really want to talk about it because a lot of nationalities get quite scared about the ghost thing. So I had another thing that happened, or two things that really I couldn't explain. So when I'm lying in bed thinking about getting up at 7:30 to cook breakfast for international visitors, and I heard footsteps go along the veranda, sounded like a young person, and I'm like, oh, staff aren't usually this keen to get to work. And I went upstairs and I looked around the veranda, and I just freaked out because there was no one else there. And then the other time, this might sound silly, I'd always tried to be home before midnight or after 1 because there's like the witching hour. I was a teen. I was out with my mates, and I came in, and there was a phone call, and I was on the phone, and I felt a presence in the room, and it wasn't like it was a bad presence. It was like just I thought, oh, my brother's in the room, and then my brain's ticking away going, you're by yourself, and that was really freaky. So I just fled, and there's just some weird stuff that happens there. I think that it was used as a lunatic asylum for a while, and has had a really terrible history, I guess, with Larnack's suicide, the original builders, and then his son committed suicide. So it's a building that's had quite a lot of tragic and difficult history.
So as a marketing person, do you lean into that and make it a destination for people to come and experience that, or do you hide that, as you say, because some cultures, some people individually don't want to be around that sort of thing? Or do you put a bob each way?
I put a bob each way.
Okay.
So some will love it and because there is like what you're selling is not just the building, but the history. There's a bit of scandal. There's a family history there. There's a lot of beauty. But then in some cultures, they just like no goes. So we don't tell those stories there. But I think that what you're doing is building an experience and a sense of anticipation. So if people ask, I'll tell them, and it's up to them whether they believe or not.
Gosh, sounds like you're on board though. That's a scary thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I used to have to sleep there by myself. It was
yeah.
When I was in charge,
Yeah.
sleeping there at nighttime with the creaks. And one time I was, I'd lie there at nighttime, and I actually did take a phone and a knife to my room. I don't know what I was going to do, but I felt a lot safer. And hearing, creak, and I'm like, it's footsteps, and then someone explained to me that it was actually the building cooling down, so a lot less scared. But still,
expanding
you're
and
out
contracting.
nowhere in the countryside, and castles, or castles attract stuff.
It's a funny way you say that so casually. Castles attract stuff. Like any of us had that kind of experience of being in a castle attracting stuff. But yeah.
Well, like it's been an interesting life, and I've been very fortunate to have been brought up like that. Really lots and lots of hard work, lots of really huge family sacrifices, but I've learned a lot along the way. And I think a Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, but I try to make the best of it.
Hey, let's talk some policy and some Dunedin City Council / mayoralty stuff. We've got to be careful because I could talk about spiritual stuff and go for another hour, but let's not do that. That's not really why we're here. Really, a little bit. No, it's not why we're here. I'm looking at an article from a few months ago, but before I go to it, about Three Waters and some decisions that have been made around Three Waters, and some commentary that you've made about I think the rift with Runanga becoming an ugly situation. What about just giving you the floor and talking to us about Three Waters, where you are on that, where you'd be on that if you were mayor, how that works in a Sophie Barker council chamber should you be wearing the chains?
Yeah, I agree with the intent of Three Waters, which is to provide safe drinking water and to look after the environment, the receiving environment and the giving environment for water. Really important. I guess the challenges that I have around that is the governance model. We've been given a governance model from the bureaucrats, really, of DIA, Department of Internal Affairs. So they came down to a meeting and they're like, this is how it's going to work. And we're like, well, where's the consultation? So that was a real problem along the way. There's a lot of concerns around privatisation, and no matter that the government says it won't be privatised, we've seen things happen in the past. Challenged by centralisation. I don't necessarily think that centralisation delivers the best outcomes, and challenged by our local voice and what happens to our Three Waters around our ability to plan. If we decided to make Wakawaiti a bigger town, perhaps, and put infrastructure in there, how are we going to get through all of those layers of bureaucracy to have our voice heard? If we've got 22 councils and 12 seats, of which we have 6, how do we have our voice heard in there? We have our own council-controlled organisations, and we are like 2 steps away from them, and they don't necessarily work for us. So how is Three Waters going to work for us? And I would actually like to see that Otago Southland model. If we do need to centralise, if the numbers are proven that we're going to save money and be more efficient, then I'm into it and deliver those water outcomes. However, really challenged by the speed that this is rushed through, the inability to see the whole picture of what it's going to look like. It's messy.
So you're saying that the centralized model, you're okay with that conceptually, but it seems that the implementation of that is where your big concerns are, and what Dunedin is able to say for Dunedin should that happen.
I don't necessarily agree with a centralised model. I think that stuff that goes into the vortex that is Wellington doesn't necessarily work for smaller cities. But if we needed to conglomerate to deliver those outcomes for, I guess, all people, for our neighbours, etc., then localised centralisation, if that makes sense. Like in Otago Southland, perhaps, where we already work together with Otago and Southland. So maybe I think one councillor did bring up unitary councils, and we are undergoing local government reform. There's 67 councils throughout New Zealand. Is that sensible? Is it a good use of money?
So 67 councils going down to 4 entities. It sounds like what you're suggesting is, if I'm going to pick a random number, if it was 15 entities, that might make more sense about still being centralized. Because I don't think there's any question within business that buying power makes things cheaper overall. If you can buy 1 million widgets rather than 10,000 widgets, you're going to get them cheaper per piece. But there could be a sweet spot. I'm going to use the word sweet spot of 3 or 4 councils together rather than 14 might be more what you were leaning towards.
Yeah, and I guess, we were given a couple of different models of what it might cost. So there was the DIA's modelling of what it might cost, which is like, oh my gosh, it's going to cost ratepayers $6,000 in the future or whatever for water. And then there was one that we as councils got, and the difference between what people were going to be paying was maybe just a few $100s to keep it more local. So I think there's some real challenges about the numbers that we've been given in the supposition. So the model that we're looking at is based on Scotland, and I'm just, you look at it and you go, did it really work? They're promising 50% efficiency. Really? 50%? Is that doable? So there's some real challenges about the actual model. I'm really concerned about it. And we've been voicing that concern all of the way through, and it's been really challenging to get government to actually pay attention. They've paused it, but they've paused it for a little while. Now they're still streaming ahead.
So this story came out March of this year, end of March, April this year, about the rift with Runanga, an ugly situation. I was interested actually where you voted actually on it, because this was about joining the group of councils that are basically against the idea of Three Waters being centralised. And the vote in Dunedin actually went 8-7 to join that group. Aaron Hawkins wasn't that stoked about that, but I'm wondering where you voted on that and why.
So I voted to join the group. I really felt like our group, the Local Government New Zealand, hadn't stood up for us enough. They'd signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, really early on with the government. And I just they are supposed to be there for us and have our voice, not just go along with whatever the government wants, so that we can negotiate the best outcome for our people. So I saw an opportunity for us to have a stronger voice to, protest that we're not being listened to. So that's why I voted. There was a whole lot of reasons which I gave at the time, but we felt we weren't being listened to in what was going on.
The group of which is now quite a few councils, like 30 plus councils, have signed that. Remind me, did Dunedin end up joining it or not? We voted to join it, but that's, I guess, saying what we're going to do in chamber. What was the outcome from it?
We joined it for maybe a week or two until the decision was overturned. And council, I think there was definitely a councillor missing at that meeting, and then the decision was overturned a couple of weeks later.
So there was another vote to say, shall we stay? And then that was overturned.
Yes.
So it went back the other way, and then it was left. I've done a lot of research on Three Waters, especially for Dunedin, right? And it seems to me, and I've spoken to people in council, off the record anonymously, they're people who I've just spoken to, who have said in Dunedin, we seem to be on target with our infrastructure, our pipe infrastructure. We seem to have it costed out, either budgeted for or planned budgeted for the future. That it seems that our sewerage is pretty good, and our drinking water is pretty good, and our stormwater needs work. Is that a fair synopsis for other people who are wondering as to where our infrastructure around pipes are at the moment?
Yeah, Dunedin has done a good job of investing, and we've committed to investing in our infrastructure. And I've seen all the results. So there is I can't remember the ministry that puts it out once a year about how each council is doing on delivering safe drinking water, how many things they've done things wrong, times they've done things wrong, etc. And Dunedin was right up there with in the one that I looked at, 100% efficiency. So we are doing really well in that space, and we have invested in that space heavily. That's where a lot of rates money has been, and where a lot of our city debt has gone as well.
This story that I just brought up before, I'll just bring up another part of it. It seems also to be speaking to, should we join this group? If we join this group, it's going to be a hard, well, I think the phrase you're quoted as using is ugly situation. It's going to be hard. The group of protest councils don't seem to have taken iwi into consideration very much about where their protests were. And I'll just read a piece from this article if people are listening. It says, Councillor Sophie Barker said it was hard to imagine two Runanga tribal councils from the Dunedin area withdrawing from a partnership with the city over differences of opinion about Three Waters reform and the relationship had previously been, if the relationship had previously been sound. It has turned into a really ugly situation, Councillor Barker said. What on earth brought us to this place? It comes down to leadership and communication with councillors. So this was, 4 months ago? On reflection, what brought us to that place? Why did this happen? And why did we get to a point where it sounds like what you're saying in this article, and you can correct me now if I'm wrong, is that there was the protest groups are very much about, like you said, lots of things, but about sort of, our councils, our control, our pipes, not about neighbours' pipes, like they can look after theirs, we'll look after ours. It might be an unfair paraphrase for some people, but in general, and it doesn't have anything to do really necessarily with co-governance and local iwi. And it seems like you're saying in there that how did we get here, and throw the baby out with the bathwater. Can you expand on that at all, or maybe tell us a bit more about what you were thinking there, what you are thinking now that it's 3, 4, 5 months later?
Yeah, I guess at the time, that was we had thought it was about the three waters. We thought that really we were worried about the what we were going to lose, local voice, etc. That government was coming in and walking all over us. So this was the reason that we wanted. I guess the 8 of us wanted to join the protest group. Was like, actually, government, you can't do this to us. Unfortunately, a lot of that got really ugly. You can see a lot of protesting, I guess, going on now, and New Zealand has turned into a bit of an uglier place about it. And when we're talking about our local mana whenua, that has been about our relationship building and our leadership. As a new councillor coming in with not a big background in working with mana whenua, etc., I asked for cultural competency training. I thought we should at least be able to say oti poti correctly, or wakawaiti correctly, and understand the naming of those, and also about tikanga, about what we'd signed up to with a 10-year-old MOU. Councillors weren't actually invited to the Māori Participation Working Party. So how can you build a relationship when just a few people are holding that relationship? So that's what I really wanted us to move forward on. So now I have succeeded in having us all invited to the Māori Participation Working Party. Personally, I've been to te reo lessons at Araituru Marae and started my journey along there. So I think that, my passion, I guess, is working with people and getting things done together. And when we've had this big breakdown in relation, I do go, well, how did this happen? It's obviously a lack of communication. We are not sharing a vision. We're not going on this journey together. So for me, my heart broke a bit over there. It was really hard. I thought we were talking about X, and then Y happened. So yeah, I cried a little bit about that one. I might sound, it's hard when people hurt.
If the vote came up today to join that protest group again, would you still vote today to join them, or are you in a different position today than you were in March-ish of this year?
I would want to see where they were in their relationship with iwi, and this has been the big blockage. Have they been talking to iwi? Everybody wants the same thing, which is a great outcome for water, for drinking water, etc. I don't necessarily think that I would vote the same way nowadays. However, we still need to try and get our voice into what government's doing. I think we just had the Water Entity Services Bill go through, and we sent our letter back going, we don't like a lot in this bill. You're still running fast forward without consultation. So how are we going to have our voice heard?
You mentioned communication, etc., in that article. Well, it's quoted that you mentioned it. I also have a quote from you that you've said publicly recently, Mayor Hawkins' leadership style, that it caused the council to, quote, not appear to be cohesive enough. Is that to do with this, or is there a bigger issue, do you think, in the council at the moment about? And the other thing I find that interesting, because it says it doesn't appear to be cohesive enough, which doesn't actually mean it isn't cohesive enough. Appearances sometimes aren't accurate. So do you think the council and councillors in particular have an issue at the moment with being cohesive? And is that a leadership style issue? And is that something you want to bring to the big seat?
We live in a political environment, so that's that we're challenged about. The cohesiveness does need to be led by the mayor, and I think that's about, I think you used an example, I guess, with when you were talking to Carmen about a group of councillors going off and writing a letter which was contrary to a decision that had been made by council. And once the decision's been made by council, well, that's it. We can revisit these things sometimes, but you just shouldn't be subverting process, and I feel like that might have gone back to councillor training, to councillor mentoring, to people understanding what their role is on council. So there's two things. There's the governance, which is about making those decisions together, about doing all of your reading, discussing, listening to the debate, coming in with, what do they say, an open mind, not an empty mind, and then making those decisions. And then there's representation. So we all represent different areas and different views. Once you're voted in, you are there for the good of the whole city, and we need to remember that. But we also represent people's views that we get out and about and talk about. So there is that tension between the political role and the governance role. I guess the cohesiveness that I'm talking about is from a personal experience of being in council. I have found it incredibly alienating. It was a huge learning curve. Now, I'd worked at council for 7 years. I'd worked in the economic development unit for 7 years, looking after the tourism sector. So I thought I knew what council was about. And I claimed things like, I'm going to hit the ground running, all those kind of things, because I know
all those
exactly
buzzwords.
So, yeah, but it is hugely complex. It is, we are responsible for, hundreds of millions of dollars of spend. And I just don't feel that the councillor training and leadership helped us enough to get to those points. And I guess if I were mayor, I'd be making sure that we had those really open conversations and using people to the best of their skills. Because I often talk about when you're in a group that, I don't say jigsaw, because a jigsaw, you've got like a predetermined outcome, but Meccano set. So somebody has got that really valuable nut or bolt that brings everything together. So you should respect everyone's opinions, and they're there because they were voted in and they have a vote and they should be respected. For me, I have been astounded at the culture within the councillors, quite frankly, and I would like to change that.
Yeah. It's a bit of a tangent, but what I said, and I think you watched Carmen's conversation, what I'm saying to each people who I'm speaking to is, on some level, these chats for me, as a selfish person who's able to do this, is about getting to know the candidates, because it's not even so much about what's before the council today. It's learning a bit about how they operate and function for what's going to come before the council in 2 years from now that we have no idea about, and where they're going to sit, sort of thing. So like, what kind of person is doing that, and as much as I like the idea of respecting everybody's opinions, I also understand that some people have, and I'm not actually referencing council or anyone in particular, but sometimes people have abhorrent opinions.
Oh yeah.
And if someone has an abhorrent opinion, I don't feel the need to respect it. Now, putting that back into council, if someone's got a lunatic perspective or whatever opinion, as mayor, I mean, like, you're talking about the cohesive nature, and I'm thinking straight away about, you might have a councillor in there that's had, several complaints made about them over several years in politics, hypothetically speaking, I'm saying. And if someone who's just not going to be a team player, you can't have cohesion necessarily with that player. Is that like you want sort of 14 out of 15 cohesive and there's one outlier? So I get what you're saying, and I like that in sort of an idealistic world, but I also don't feel that's the real world. So as the mayor, like you brought it up, so I wouldn't mind talking about it. The idea about this one-way system turning two-way, and if you heard the Carmen one, you would have heard me say this. I don't get it. Like, I haven't yet heard the need for it. If there's currently 2 lanes going south and 2 lanes going north on different roads, how is it any different from 2 lanes going south and 2 lanes going north on separate roads? Like, I don't get the argument that, there's going to be 1,000 more trucks all of a sudden because the capacity hasn't changed, and I don't get how the traffic flow is going to be better because the capacity hasn't changed. So the only reason that I seem to have thought of myself out of any possible need for it as if the entrance to the new hospital is only on one street, and then you can get access from both directions. But if there's an entrance on both streets, then again, I don't see a need for it. Now, I'm not saying therefore I'm against it. I'm saying I don't have the information one way or the other to make sense. But for people who don't know what we're talking about, there was a decision made in council, and then there was a series of councillors who signed a letter basically going, meh, and then sent it to that's like a technical term, sent it above, I guess, the mayor's head, or above council's head, straight to the people at Waka Kotahi, basically saying, we're not happy, as was evident by the vote, because some people voted against it. So I'm going to play something as well, because I thought from my conversation with Carmen, this was one of the more interesting things. The other thing that happened in that conversation, and I'm going to play a little 30 seconds here of that conversation, is that it appears one of the councillors sent that letter forward the other people who signed to it won't say now whether they agreed to be signed to it. And I'll play this for other people who haven't seen it.
What I would say about that letter was that another councillor sent it. I didn't send it.
But you signed on to it.
Well, I voted the way I did. So that's what I'll say on that.
Well, hang on. Did you? No. I want clarity. Are you saying you didn't give permission for your name to be attached to the letter that was sent on?
What I would say is I can't remember us doing it, and the other councillors I've talked to can't either. But it doesn't mean that we didn't do that.
So it appears that there's been claims made now about that in particular, that this letter that was sent, you know, after the people who lost the vote, should we just put it that way, is now being said that it's really only one person who sent the letter on, and the rest of the people don't seem to be able to be confident enough with their memory today to say, yes, we definitely supported that. So I guess my question to you overall, because we're talking about cohesiveness, is you've got council members here who are basically going, we're not going to follow the structure of how council works. We're going to do what we want anyway. If you're well, first of all, where did you vote on that? Like, did you vote to go two ways or keep the one ways, and why? And also, secondly, as mayor, if you're facing this somewhat miniature revolt, how do you deal with that?
So first of all, it wasn't a vote on a two-way versus a one-way. It was a vote to have a conversation with Waka Kotahi, with the Ministry of Health, about a generational spend on what was going to be a change because the hospital's coming in. So when the first motion came out, this isn't confidential, so I'm like, I guess the papers have been made available now. So the recommendation was changed somewhat, because there's no way that I was going to vote for the one ways to be changed to two ways. We have to have a conversation about what is going to deliver the best system for Dunedin people. You know, it's a state highway. There's a hospital in the middle. The most important thing to me is to save lives, is to get people into the hospital efficiently. So that's really what I want to concentrate on. You know, yes, we do have to create those state highway arteries through the city at efficiency, etc., but we need to make Kotahi not go, they were going to slap a solution on the table. This is it. And we're like, actually, no, we need to talk about this, because you're going to be spending a huge amount of money on the system, on the state highway, and we want to be part of the conversation. So that's really where I stood on that. I'm neither here nor there about a one-way versus two-way. What interests me is what is
so just for clarity, on that vote, did you want to therefore vote to have the conversation or not?
Have the conversation.
Okay. So that means you voted opposite from what the letter was saying. You voted for the conversation.
Absolutely, because we have to have those conversations. I think that coming into something with a fixed idea of what the outcome should be, you need to examine the evidence, and we've got a big change. We've got a big hospital being built in the middle, so we need to do traffic modelling. You know, it's really frustrating.
And can I just say, as a voter and a ratepayer, for people to basically, if what you're telling me is how it is, and I apologize if I misrepresented it slightly, what we're just talking about is the conversation. For councillors to vote against a conversation, who then say, some of them are saying, I want to be your mayor. I'm like, well, hang on. Yeah, because I think, well, who would be anti a conversation? That seems problematic to me, at least, just from my personal. You don't need to comment on that because it's not a question to you. I'm stating publicly that if you've got councillors who are kind of refusing a conversation, that's problematic to me.
Sort of about having an idealistic thing, and often it's change versus anti-change. I guess, you know, the world changes and we have to change with it. So we need to look at what is the best solution, not just for now, but for 20 years ahead. This hospital is going to be there for 50 years and roads change all the time. But we need to make sure that if we're investing money, if Waka Kotahi are investing money, the Ministry of Health are investing money, get in a room, talk, and decide on the best outcome, because it makes sense. It's common sense approach. Don't just go heels in the sand about things.
It actually seems a bit bizarre to me now that it's been spelt out like that. Why? That seems you'd have to have a conversation around traffic with the new hospital, full stop. So what are we bitching about here? It's like, if that's got to be a part of this. Is it just because the one-way switching two-way has been mentioned as a possibility and they're just reacting to that before the conversation even happens?
Yeah, well, I think that people I was reading, was it 1976 when it was changed from two ways into one ways? And there was an old ODT article, and it's like, everyone hates this, and then it works pretty well. And that's that challenge. Change is hard, and especially with COVID, I think people just hate any change. And I think the thing is that we, as the responsible governors, needs to be open to having those conversations and need to be able to talk about it. And when we talk about the second thing, which is the writing of the letter, we do have code of conduct, which is you have certain standards that you're supposed to uphold, which is about also the integrity of a democracy. So if you've got a group going off and doing something else that becomes very public and is dealing with the government, how much credibility do we have if some of our councillors are running off and going, well, we don't agree with what councillors decided? That's not okay, actually. It looks
tin pot. It's embarrassing.
And when we don't want to be that tin pot city. What, for me, Dunedin needs to be recognised as the great small city that it is, and a main centre. When we see where money's going, they talk about Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, and is Dunedin on the radar? Are we on the map? We didn't really get any PGF money, where's our investment? So we need to state our case, be cohesive, and make sure that we're standing up and being counted. Otherwise, what happens, we go backwards while other cities go forwards.
So you're mayor, you're in the big seat, you got the chains on, and this kind of things happens with, 6 of your councillors. How do you address that? Especially now we've been talking about cohesiveness and talking about communication from the mayor. You kind of said it 15 minutes ago that, the mayor sort of sets it, or it needs to be involved with it. So you've got this rebel breakaway group, however people want to word it. How do you deal with it? What do you do to bring back cohesion? What happens?
Yeah, I guess I've dealt with stuff like that in my past, because I ran 65 staff when I was at the castle, and I also was in a position with of responsibility at the Economic Development Unit, where I was dealing with all of the bus drivers and all the people that wanted to be on the port. And I guess it's helping them, getting them in the room, helping them to see the bigger vision, which is about attracting the right amount of spend and the right solution for Dunedin. And I think that if you concentrate on that vision, then you can bring people together, and show that things aren't just black or white, that you can't just dig your heels in, and also talk to them about their responsibility to the people of Dunedin and what they've signed up to. Because people think, I'm going to get on council and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But we don't quite wear a straitjacket, but we have a lot of responsibilities to the people that that live in Dunedin, and about governance responsibilities. And I, done the Institute of Directors course. I've sat on various trusts, etc. So I do understand. And when I was at council, I also managed the relationship with the CCO, so I understand a lot about that. And when you're getting, enthusiastic community members coming in on council, you do need that crash course in governance, what your responsibilities are, to be mentored. I was lucky enough to have a friend already on council that helped me through some of that. I helped them when they first got on council, because I knew not quite where the bodies were buried, but I knew about how a lot of things worked, because I knew what hadn't been done in the past, and that was helpful. So that's some of the stuff that I would like to do, is to help those councillors that get on, and we will have at least 3 new councillors this time, to be more ready to serve their community, because that's what we're about. We're there to serve the community.
I'd be interested to know, you've brought up sort of my paraphrase of what you said about how we spend our money, how we look after it, stewardship of the money. In Dunedin, do you know of anything, has you got any kind of passions for yourself of things that in Dunedin are currently underfunded or overfunded? Like, where, if you were the mayor and you were starting to drive some of this policy, is there areas you'd like to drive more money into? And do you think there's any bloated, inflated budgets at the moment that could require stripping down a bit?
Back in the old days when I was working at council, there used to be like we used to get, I think it was the Rainbow Book, and there was a lot more digging down to the numbers. So as councillors now, we're just given a lot of high level strategic numbers, and I really feel that we need to be getting more information and digging down into those, because it does, I'm a gardener, like any tree that grows willy-nilly, some pruning is often needed. And I think we need to look very, very carefully at what we've promised, which is our strategies and our plans, and what we've delivered. The stuff that I'm really passionate about, it sounds so boring. I am so into strategy, and we have got key strategies that have sat on the shelf, many of them getting dusty. Nothing's happening with the environment strategy. Climate change action plan, declared an emergency in 2019, 2022, no plan. Heritage plan, 2007, nothing happening with that. And yesterday I heard about the disability plan, 2007. Where's that sitting? So it just drives me crazy because I love a good plan and I love to make stuff happen. And though it sounds really boring, we're not doing a lot of that stuff. We're not delivering on our environment plan. We're not delivering on our social wellbeing strategy. So when I got in, I talked about the dusty old strategies, and now we're doing a refresh, but we've dropped the ball on actually delivering on the other strategies. And when we look at some of the key issues, which is that there is only 25% of people are satisfied with the performance of mayor and councillors. Now, that's not good. I worked my whole life in customer in business satisfaction, and that would make me hang my head and cry. So I take responsibility for that as well. But we need to rebuild that communication, and we need to work on delivering those things that we promised all those years ago. No wonder people don't trust us.
How do you build them? I mean, does that mean because you're talking about building, I guess, resources or building structure. How does that happen, though? Is that a financial thing that the council needs to actually increase funding for, or like how does that actually happen, and how does it impact? Look, let me say this really clear. I'm not one of those people that goes, we shouldn't be spending $3,000 on a mural. The ratepayers. That's not my vibe. Yeah. But it's still valid to say, we're going to increase all these areas and do better. There is obviously a budgetary consideration. How does that all work?
I think that it's action and accountability. It's turning around and analysing what we've promised, and then how we're going to deliver it, and are we spending money in the right places. And the councillors do need to take responsibility, because I've been chasing around. I'm like, well, where does the buck stop for these strategies? And we have a whole lot of delegations to our committees, which say the community and culture is supposed to look after the social wellbeing strategy, or the one that I'm on, planning and environment, supposed to look after the environment strategy. That hasn't happened. We've been acceptors of reports. So we sit there and we get activity reports, which I'm just not interested in,
So you as mayor want to get more into the nuts and bolts. It almost sounds like what you're saying, Sophie, is when I ask you what's underfunded, what's overfunded, it almost like you're saying, yeah, we need to figure that out. But to figure that out, you need to get more involved deep into the weeds, rather than the headline numbers that you might get at your council table. You need to know what's behind it. So is it fair for me to paraphrase by saying, when I ask you that question, your response sounds like it's, yeah, I want to do that. I want to find out what's overfunded and what's underfunded, and you don't have anything specifically to bring up right now about the financial side of things?
No, I was the one councillor that a couple of years ago, what happens is we go through our long-term plan, and then the community come in and say, we want some money for this and money for that. And a lot of money gets chucked in without reports. And I took a stand and voted no against them all, which nobody talked to me for days about. And then the next one, which was this year, Councillor O'Malley joined me in that, because we wanted to make structure happen, because there's all this, we're going to make a new thing and put some money into that. And while I might agree there is a process that needs to be taken care of, which is we've got staff who are experts in these matters, and they need to analyse all the options, and you need to invest for success. You can't just go putting sticking plasters on things. You need to figure out what's wrong with the patient and actually have an overall cure. So I just see lack of focus on delivering actually what the community wants. We are there for the community, and that's what we need to be doing.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I guess you've led us into it perfectly, here is your website, sophieformayor.com. If people want to find out more about you, is you mentioned in there about listening to the community. Under the heading Sensible, Strategic, Smart, you've said Dunedin needs strong, sensible leadership, both inspiring and realistic. As a current independent councillor, I'm dedicated to ensuring that we're accountable, action-orientated, listen, and to advocate for the community. If you've watched the conversation with Carmen, you'll have heard I had this conversation with her about listening to the community and how much we follow along what the community wants versus pushing it back against what us ratepayers want versus what the city needs. So can you expand or unpack a little bit more what you mean by listening to the community? Do you mean the will of the people, quote unquote? If 87% of people don't want the two ways to go one way, or other way around, one way to go two way, then it shouldn't happen. Where is your listening to the people versus doing what's best for the city? Should those two things not align? How do you approach that as mayor?
Yeah, we get out and we do engagement and consultation, and we will do that on various matters. But in the end, this is why we voted in to make tough decisions. So you take all of the evidence, and I mean, we talk about George Street, and I voted in the end for the one way because it delivered higher safety, more parking, better city amenity, and I really believed that we needed to create a destination to revitalise the centre city. So I read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages on that. Some people are like, oh, well, the consultant said X. And I'm like, well, actually, it was when you got down to the nitty gritty of what the differences were between one way and two way, it was much of a muchness. But the one way had higher delivery of safety amenity and creating that destination. So that's one of the things that councillors are supposed to do, and sometimes those decisions are unpopular, and I have to wear that. My mother tells me off, about some of the decisions that we've made, especially around parking. But we have to make them for the best of the city, and that's what, when we swear our oath, that's the oath that we're swearing. So we have to analyse, do as much reading as we can, listen to people, and then also educate people, which is taking people along with us on the journey.
Not to be flippant, it's not what I want to be, but then what's the point in listening to the people? And I asked that, let me expand that a little bit, because if you guys in the seats of power have all the information and the public don't, what's the point in listening to them? It sounds like you'd only listen to them really as I like to make them feel like they've been heard. But if you've actually got all the information to make the best decision for the city, what's the point? Because I often say that about various political institutions. We can't know what's behind those doors and what's being said. Some of it's not allowed to be passed out and passed on. So we're making our kind of comments or complaints or whatever without the information. You have the information. So what does it matter what people say?
Yeah, so all that information that we talked about on George Street is public. Yep. It's on the website, and it's great big form. And we also do those debates in public. And I sat on the retail committee at Business South, and I took that information along to them and talked to them about it and got their feedback on it, because in the end, the businesses down there's what the residents think, but there's also what the businesses think. And it was heartening to me, and actually kept me on course, because the businesses did want that change. They understood that that we needed to replace the pipes, that it was going to be really challenging, but they could see the outcome. So when I say that, we have all those hundreds and hundreds of pages and I'm reading them on people's behalf, the other stuff that I'm doing is I'm out there in the community, member of Business South, Women in Business, Otago, the Gasworks, all those things. And I get out and about. I am on a lot of social media challenges and channels, and always open for those conversations. So while the public might think that they want something, I guess I'll compare it to what I was doing at Economic Development Unit. So everybody wanted so we were saying, what sort of training do you want? Do you want training in marketing, or do you want to, learn about cash flow and business planning? And everyone, marketing, and it was like everybody wanted the Cocoa Pops and not the porridge. And in the end, we have to do the porridge. We have to do the strong, sustaining stuff, but we need to have people understand why we're doing it. And I think that's part of that communication is talking about that vision and then the whys, and making things simple for people to understand, and getting rid of a lot of that miscommunication as well, which I think causes a lot of the problems.
It's funny, just following on from your analogy of the porridge versus the Cocoa Pops, the idea that comes back in my head, and it's an analogy as well, but it's normally the young, immature, and experienced people that want the Cocoa Pops, and it's the older, wiser people who know a bit more about how their bodies work in this metaphor and what they need to sustain themselves, who want the porridge. I wonder if that actually runs alongside the same analogy you have just said, because the Cocoa Pops will give you a burst for a second as the sugar kicks in, but they won't sustain you through the day like porridge will. Just a thought.
Yeah, well, that's the analogy that I kind of used to explain to people, because it was I was trying to sell something that people just didn't want, because doing business plans is boring and it's hard, and, you can get that sugar hit through creating a Facebook page. But if you don't know where you're going and what you're trying to do, then you kind of get a bit lost. So I think with council, one of the advantages of being 55, I guess, is life experience and understanding about why you're making decisions and that long-term thinking. And for me, it was a change as well. The complexity of council is huge, and all of those decisions intersect on each other. So it's really hard work, and it should be.
For people who aren't quite clear on this, because we've kind of jumped between the two-way system and the one-way system being George Street, we are talking about the pedestrianisation of George Street. You said something interesting as you were talking there, and I just want to touch base on it quickly, because you talked about being involved in the consultation groups and that businesses were for it. The councillors and the mayoralty candidates that are against pedestrianisation of it typically say 67% of businesses voted against it in a poll. I just thought for the first time, have the businesses who would be impacted, like exactly where the one-way pedestrianisation would be, because it's not all of George Street, have they been talked to? And what do those businesses, because they're obviously the ones that'll be impacted either positively or negatively, most of all, what do we know what those businesses have had to say?
Yeah, I think, everybody likes to pull a statistic out of the hat, and I think that there are a lot of big businesses on George Street as well, and obviously some small businesses as well. We had gone through all of those consultation routes and discussions about it. Nobody likes change. I think that's part of that challenge. And when we're talking businesses, yes, but we're also talking a place for people. This is their centre of town where they want to see themselves. And for me, my motivation and passion, I guess, about standing for council, etc., is because I have a 19-year-old daughter, and she tells me Dunedin is boring. So we want to make it a place where people want to live, where they want to stay, where we are modern and vibrant and exciting to be in, and accessible for everyone. And I think I say, a city that works for everyone. When you look at what we're doing there, we're making it so that it's more disability friendly. So the channeling and the curbs, and people can come into town, people can see their own cultures reflected in it. So we need to build something to bring people into that retail sector, because we all know, we've all shopped online, that there is a huge competition for people staying at home, especially with COVID, and we need something transformational to bring people out.
Might be a good time to get your views on COVID, because I'm interested in knowing what the mayoralty candidates think about the response to COVID, how the central government has dealt with that, and how New Zealand's done in general with that response. One of the reasons, Sophie, and I have said this to everyone, is that we hear these groups like Voices for Freedom, I think they are, talking about having secret candidates coming out and not telling people where their allegiances are. And I'm not interested in having that conversation with you, but it'd be good to get your feel and vibe over how you think the country has done under COVID. Be interested to know what you think about the vaccine process and that kind of thing as well, just to let people know as to where you stand on all that kind of stuff.
I have been joking about live streaming my next vaccine because people have been telling me that they've been checking up on me. I guess my attitude comes from, I don't have a spleen. I lost it in a horse riding accident when I was young, so I'm compromised. My mum's 80. We were just like, please, can we keep it her 80th birthday, if not more than that? And my daughter works in retail in hospo at a restaurant. So we all had varying
risk factors.
Yeah, risk factors, I guess.
Sure.
So I feel like what the government did was the responsible thing to do, and as a community, we need to look after each other. So I'm getting vaccinated for all of the people, and putting my mask on for all of the people that I know that are vulnerable. And vulnerabilities aren't immediately obvious in so many cases, but we all have people that we love, and we should be trying to keep them safe. I understand where people don't like the mandates, but I just feel it's about respect for other people and keeping ourselves safe.
Yeah, so it sounds like pretty clearly you're on board with the health professionals as opposed to the I don't know what to say. I don't want to disrespect anybody, but the concerns around alleged freedom breaches, so to speak.
Yeah, and you could always see two sides to each stories, but
sure.
Two whatever it is. But for me, it was about protecting people that I love and people that I care about in my community. So that's why I was committed to doing it. Yeah, and I guess what's been quite challenging is around some of those traffic lights. We're still like, Thank goodness they send out updates, because I'm like, what are we doing orange? It's been quite challenging, and especially like, I guess I can talk about it without emotion now, but I was in the tourism industry. I worked for the Royal Albatross Centre, and
Yeah.
my mum's still at the castle, and I witnessed firsthand the devastation of what COVID did to those businesses. I had people on my sofa in my sitting room here crying. It was awful. It was so bad, and I can talk about it now, but it was devastating. So we have had that business impact. It's put, I guess, the family business of Castle back years. What was mum saying they're facing, a insurance bill of over $100,000 with no income coming in, having to
Wow.
let 2/3 of their staff go. And I worked at the Albatross Centre, the Peninsula Trust, and I decided to leave in the end because I wanted younger people to be able to keep their jobs. We got hardly any income coming in, and I had work at council, so I didn't want to hold on jealously to that piece when I knew that the business was challenged, and we didn't know when we were coming out of it. So it's been hard and it's been hurtful, and I understand why people feel the way that they do.
Reading up on you and looking through your website, and I don't mean this in a flippant or disrespectful way, but you don't seem to have a thing. Like, a lot of people are like public transport, or they're like, the physio pool, or the whatever it is, or the one ways, or the pedestrianisation.
Mhm.
Do you have something? Like, I was going to look up there, some of my notes say public transport for Dunedin, and there's always a conversation around there. So I'd like to ask you about that. But as I'm thinking, I'm like, what's your thing? Do you have a thing? Or it sounds like you're kind of, I want to get into everything, but do you have a thing that you're kind of particularly wanting to see move forward as mayor?
Yeah, well, it's the environment and its heritage, and those
Okay.
are the two
Well,
things.
that makes complete sense, doesn't it? Heritage with Alana Castle, of course.
And
Yeah.
economic development, because I was there when the economic development strategy was written. So it's about, and when I say environment heritage, the economic development is what enables a lot of these things to flourish.
Yep.
So it's like, if we're going to look after the environment. So I worked at the Peninsula Trust, and we had 200,000 visitors coming through who all bring their economic development in, which then has conservation outcomes. And I volunteer every week at Blue Penguins Pukakura, plug for Blue Penguins. I love them, and I really want them to flourish, and things are tough. But that's that same stuff, is all of the money that comes in from there is helping to plant trees, to nourish the fauna, etc. And then you see the outcomes with heritage, with tourism, economic development, heritage, that we can save all those buildings that we care about. So my number one stuff is kind of, I've got a degree in economics, and have worked in economic development for a long time, making council more business friendly, etc. But the stuff that nobody kind of cares if I'm going to go, I am so into strategy. But in the end, we have to have that vision, and we have to have that focus, and we have to deliver what we've promised. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So the public transport, I'm like, get the buses back. Then we can have an integrated transport system. So we can't just pick a piece up here and pick a piece up there. We need to go, what's it going to look like in 10, 20 years' time? How do we fit all of those bits together to make it work? So, I agonized over what's your little catchphrase, and I'm like, I need to stop agonizing over that and get out and talk about things. So I think that for me, I've sort of said approachable, authentic leadership, and I think that's what people want to see, is someone that they can trust. We need to rebuild trust in council, and then we need to deliver. So we made a lot of promises. We promised the arts community, their performing arts thing. We've promised the South Dunedin, the library, Sammy's, what are we going to do about that? So we need to look at all of those things that we've promised through our strategies. We promised a climate change plan, we promised an environment strategy, a social wellbeing. So we need to focus on delivery. It's boring, I know.
It almost sounds like you're saying, on some level, not that you don't have your own stuff as well, but we need to get our house in order first with the stuff we've already planned and promised, and then ask me next time round about where we're going now after we've got our house in order.
Yeah, I say sensible, and that's why. So I guess some of my friends love me, is because I'm very common sense and very sensible, And it might sound boring, but I hope that people will appreciate that. I'm not here for political agenda. I don't have any boats to row. I'm not made whatever it is. I'm here for Dunedin, and I want Dunedin to flourish. And I believe that we need to get back on track. Focus on the stuff that we promised. If there's stuff that has changed, then we need to change it, and we need to focus on making sure that there's action and accountability. You know, that's the stuff that I care about.
You've also identified yourself as a, quote, true independent. What does that mean?
Oh, well, a lot of people are like, oh, are you with Team Dunedin, or are you do you belong to a political party, etc., etc. And I don't think like that. I take the issues that are in front of me and I analyze them according to my intelligence and my abilities. So I guess that's where it's independent. I'm not going to be swayed, I guess, by a party that I might have signed up to deliver me an election, perhaps, or yeah. So no political road to hoe. Sorry, whatever.
Never been a member of a political party?
No.
So
I'm thinking when I was at
independent.
university, I'm like, it was a long time ago. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And I really kind of don't like those national politics and local body politics. So when we've been talking about Three Waters, yeah, we've got, we do have some people on there that have been elected on certain groups. And I feel like it's like, don't criticize the government. And we need to be able to have that strong independent voice and go, we don't like this. We want to challenge it. So that's where I sit on the independence, is I'm not going in on, oh, I believe X, Y, and Z, because we need to be flexible about our thinking and we need to concentrate on what's best for the city.
Hey, as mayor, what can you do to help residents with the current cost of living crisis, if anything? I mean, I can see that. I think rates increases are going to be at 6.5%, for example. I might be right with that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But what, as the person in the big chair, and in this current climate, like I realized today, the last 2 days I've gone out and filled my car with gas. It's $150. Went to Pack and Save, got some basics, not even a full week shop, $150. So, $300 in 2 days on basically fuel to get to Pack and Save, and then a few odds and ends from Pack and Save. Not that, so you can see it. Everyone can see it, the cost of living, quote unquote, crisis at the moment. What can you do as mayor? Do you have any thoughts around that as mayor to help the people of Dunedin with that overall crisis?
So I think there's a few ways to think about this, and us adding in those extra charges and putting rates up, it hurts people. It hurts me when I open my rates bill and just go, well, actually, what am I getting for this? And do I feel confident that this money is being spent well? And that's why I wanted to, I think you said, get down in the weeds with some of the spending, because we absolutely need to be hand on heart that every dollar that is being spent is being invested wisely in the city's future. So I definitely want to keep the rates rises down. We need to look at our CCOs, our council controlled organisations, Aurora, City Forests, et cetera, to see they haven't delivered a dividend for a long time. I think we're getting, is it 5.5 million maybe this time round, but that's bit of moving things around, I think. So we need to examine those. And one of our questions should be, why are we investing why are we keeping them? Are they good long-term investments? Are they going to pay off? And we need to make sure that we are controlling them. When I came in, I was surprised with how loose it was. And I have been, I guess, fighting to have tougher statements of intent. I think the last ones, we had a chance for giving feedback. So I think about 30 things that I thought should be improved. And then I got things held up because I read the Local Government Act, and I'm like, we've got another month here. Because what happens is that the council controlled organisations go, hey, here's our statement of intent, which is basically what they're going to deliver in the next year. And I'm like, this process sucks. So there is actually a proper process, which we give them a letter of expectation. And we were writing that not at the right time. So we were writing the letter of we weren't writing one for years, so not in control. So anyway, I've been pushing to get that process changed so that we are actually in control of those companies, and are they delivering, and is the investment in the right place? So we need to make sure that they're working for us. And then we also need to make sure that our council facilities are accessible, and we're keeping our operational costs down and our costs for entry down, things like Moana Pool, keeping the library stream, we've got rid of fines, and all of those public services that help everybody in our society gains from, free entry to Toitu, the art gallery. So we still have rich lives without being rich pets. That's a little bit of a facile answer, but we really do need to be looking at a lot of those costs, and also whether the stuff that we're investing in is actually working. It's when I worked at council, I chopped up my council credit card and I said, I am not having a coffee on the little old lady down South Dunedin because that's not okay. And I'm also the councillor that doesn't have lunch catered for either. So when you've got a long meeting, and everyone gets their lunch catered, and I said, oh, no thanks, and wanted to pay for my Christmas dinner as well, because I just shouldn't be taking all of that stuff. Occasional bit of stationery and we paperclip maybe. I don't know if that's where the corruption sets in, but I choose to go and buy my lunch and support local businesses, because it's the way I grew up, Scottish Presbyterian, that is so deep within, and it's public money and you have to be responsible for it. So I'm really, really passionate about that kind of stuff.
Is that a culture you see with the other councillors around you, that the odd coffee or the lunch is a pretty easy thing to expect? As mayor, is that something that you'd want to cut out? Like, could you make a decision that, people going to be teachers don't get lunch catered for them, so you guys can bring your own? Is it something you'd go down and try and stop?
I think we should have a discussion about it, because my understanding is, what is the reason behind this? And it's like, if you have a meeting that's over a certain period of time, and for some groups that I sit on, like the grants subcommittee, there's a certain amount of manaakitanga of hospitality. So when you're asking people from outside to come in, then you might provide hospitality. But for councils, I think we should have a serious discussion, because if we're talking about public money, then I think we need to be seen to be pretty clean on it. And I would like to see us councillors in their little lunch break out talking to people and getting some fresh air. Good for the thinking.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, actually. And good on you. I sort of feel a bit the same, that I often get guests on my podcast or on my other version of BHN, and sometimes they send stuff and sometimes they do that, but more often than not I just say, look, I'll buy it. You're a struggling artist. $20 for your CD or for your whatever. It's like, I'll buy it off you, and then it doesn't come out of your back pocket. It doesn't need to. So I that's an admirable trait, because it's that idea of, you can trust you with the pennies, you can trust you with the pounds. So
I've always been, that I guess we go back to the independent thing. I was scrap with my friends over who's going to pay for the cup of tea, because that's just the way I was brought up. For us at the council, we had no money. Yeah. So every cent was precious. I remember, don't waste power, 10 cents an hour. So always flicking off where I go, because we just grew up with no money. So I think there is the flip side of that same conversation, though, and I do find it a bit weird. Being mean?
Being mean, yeah. At the other side of that conversation, I always find it strange when people in Dunedin seem to wear as a badge of honor things like, I woke up in my bedroom with ice on the inside of the windows, and they say that like it's a good thing, like that makes them a better person. And I'm like, there is a middle ground. There is somewhere in the middle, which seems more sensible to me.
Yeah, well, my daughter's going out, getting a flat this year, and I was like, don't suffer, don't breathe in that mold. So she's got an ensuite bathroom, for goodness sake. But you've got to look after yourself, because it's your responsibility. And I think that sensible spending, and spending on the things that are important, like health is important. There is that stoicism though, and I feel like we're quite stoic, and a lot of the times we don't really know how to have fun in Dunedin. I keep my diary, which I must burn sometime, about my life when I was at university. This is happy memories that I did have fun once, but we do get very conservative. And I dealt with a lot of people from outside Dunedin when I was running we had a business clinic, so it was available. We did it in the library, so you don't have to go to council, which is confusing. And I met some amazing people there, and I'd have to explain, because I'd be finding Dunedin quite difficult. We talk about ourselves as being warm and friendly, and we'll be warm and friendly to a certain point, but the actual taking sometimes people into our hearts. And I was saying, it's that Presbyterian Scots thing, it's that conservatism, that seriousness, and we do need to change. We live in a modern world, and while it's good that we're conservative, because that means that we are sensible. In some ways, it's not great if we're not opening our hearts and accepting change, which we need to change. We live in a world of change.
I have a lot of friends who are comedians, and fairly high-profile, touring the country comedians, and more than one of them has commented to me that Dunedin is one of the places that people sit on their hands more than anybody else in the theatre. So I've heard it from, people who are here to help us have fun, heard it from them. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this as well. It kind of goes back a little bit to the cohesiveness conversation, but it's really following on from what's been happening in central government with Sam Uffindell and Gaurav Sharma. There are numerous ODT articles, etc., about the culture of council, particularly within the councillors of council, of there being bullying and a bit of a toxic culture in there. Do you see that at all? Is that something that's evident within those chambers? And again, if you were mayor, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, so I've brought these things up, and I think I've said on social media that I've had comments to me like, what was it? We needed a Sheila, good for a blonde. Here comes, excuse me, here comes the perfume princess. Oh, you look like Barbie today. So, there's just that stuff that goes on, and exclusion. I mean, it's obvious that there's a tight-knit group that controls things, I guess, and that's pretty hard. It's very hard sometimes to walk into the council chambers when there is that stuff going on. For me, it is the most toxic place that I've ever worked, and I've worked in hospo.
Wow.
I managed functions with lots of people who had too much to drink and were a lot older than me. So, yeah, I've found it really hard, and I guess that's why there needs to be a change into this behaviour is not acceptable, because when you're a new councillor, you are fairly powerless, because there is an entrenched system of doing things and an entrenched way of behaving, and that's actually not acceptable. So how do you change that culture? And I think that is having those open conversations with those people who have been behaving like that. You can't change people, that's really difficult, but I think that opening up the communication and saying what is and isn't acceptable, because I just guess I usually go into the shock phase and I'm like, well, what can I do about this? I have no power. So like one of the reasons that I decided to stay, because I was like, well, I've had a really great career in the private and trust sector. Why am I staying and doing this? And because I'd spent 3 years, the public of Dunedin have invested 3 years in me becoming an RMA commissioner, becoming a better councillor, all of that kind of stuff. I just found that I couldn't leave, and I thought, what would be the thing that would make me stay? And it is about a culture change. That's what needs to be delivered, and maybe hopefully I could deliver that.
If there are, and let's not mention any names necessarily, if there are some of the same crew there with you as mayor, should you get there, that are there now, that are responsible for somewhat of that toxic culture, is that a feasible idea that it can be changed then?
I think that when you're in a position of power, things are very different and the tables are turned.
Okay.
When you are not in a position of power, and I think many people who've worked in many places would agree, then you it's very hard to have a voice without being seen as, it's very difficult to have a voice. You can see that often people complain.
Does that then mean therefore the current person in power, the current mayor, has failed when it comes to this culture? Because if there is a toxic culture, you've said, and I wrote it down, the most toxic place I have ever worked. If there is that culture now, and you're now saying once the tide is turned and you have the position of power, you have more of an ability to change it, does that therefore mean the current mayor has failed in the idea of making, welcoming the area to not be so toxic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everybody has different strengths, and I guess this was how this council journey started off for me. So new councillor, like, cool, here I am. And where's the training? Where's the mentorship? Where's the openness, the communication? And I guess if you're going to build good teams, then you have to be open and honest and communicate, and not duck away. How am I going to phrase that? That hasn't been what I felt. Like, there is a group that's been there for a really, really long time, and they've learnt to behave in a certain way. And they do talk about when you're in a position of power that it does have an influence on how you behave. And I always told my friends just to tell me if I'm being I have a word for it, but I'm not going to say that word right now, because of people. Oh, you're a councillor, but some people tend to believe their own publicity, I guess, and then that doesn't make them able to reach out to people. I don't think I phrased that very well, but it was not what I expected to walk into. I know it's a political situation, but if I were the leader, then I would have made sure that everyone around me was had access to information, to training, and had positions within council that made them feel valued. There are always going to be challenging personalities, but I just believe in that open communication and then setting the standards of behaviour, etc. I mean, it's a debating chamber. It's always going to get a little bit hairy.
I hear you explaining your perspective, but what I also hear is, has the current mayor failed? A bit of a no comment in that answer. Would that be fair?
I hate to dish out on people. I guess that's the challenge, and we all have our, I said, strengths and stuff like that. And I did complain twice about some of the behaviour, and maybe it changed for a week or so, but then it sort of came because it's entrenched in some people, and then there's just those different power differential which make things difficult,
Okay. This is going to be your time to dump on people, just so you know, because this is the last few questions. According to the ODT, a trio of retiring Dunedin City Councils say the city has been progressing nicely. So I guess my question is, why are you a better mayor than the incumbent if the city is progressing nicely?
Well, nicely is a bit of a wet word, isn't it? We want to have ambition for the city. They might think that, but for me, we've dropped the ball on a lot of things, and we go back to that strategy, back to the promises that we made the community, back to the climate change. We've had a lot of reports about stuff, and it's kind of okay. And then we look at our stats around tourism, around economic development, kind of okay, nicely. I would like us to do a lot better than that, and a 25% satisfaction in mayor and leadership. Is that nicely? 30% satisfaction with consultation. Is that nicely? Yeah.
All right. Let's say that you get into a situation where you're mayor, but your council is voting against everything you do. If you could just get one thing through, like one thing to achieve as mayor in your whole term, what would that one thing be?
Oh, that's very challenging. Do I go for the big one? I'd go back to the strategy thing. No, actually, I'm going to go to the thing that annoys me the most, the 2007 Heritage Strategy. If I could get one thing through, and I'm sure they'd all agree on this, we need to refresh the strategy and get some action so we're not seeing falling down buildings.
The other end of the spectrum, right? So you've got a council and they're working well. You're all working well together. You're cohesive, and the communication is amazing. So what will you achieve as mayor in the first 12 months?
Gosh, first of all, I talked about bringing the council up to speed, so that we will obviously have at least 3 new councillors, and making sure that they are trained, mentored, etc. And I think I want to get the house in order. I would like to I keep mentioning the strategies. We have a forward work program that kind of creeps a little bit forward a little bit more, so we need to make sure that the staff are delivering. We have a big bureaucracy, so why is stuff getting lost in that bureaucracy? We need to I think I did ask the CEO the straight question, when are we going to get reporting on the strategies? We've promised an annual hui, what's happening with that? And the answer that I seem to get back is, we've sort of gone on hiatus until we do the refresh. And I'm like, that might take a long time. So I'm about delivery. I think that that's what I want to do in the 12 months. Great. Let's get on with it.
Okay, last question. Councillor Sophie Barker, running for Dunedin City Mayor. Why are you the best person to be Mayor for Dunedin moving forward?
I guess there's 2 roles for the mayor. There's the representative role, and then the governance role. So I'm simplifying it. So I guess I'm approachable, authentic. I'm not hiding behind anything. A real people person, relationship builder, which I've had to be all of my life. Also analytical, so I have an economics degree that I've talked about. We've also had successful businesses, etc., and a team builder. So it's that personal stuff, and the approachable stuff's really important because people do come to you in the street, and you need to be out and be visible. And then the second bit is the governance skills, which is about having that business experience. Because talking about council as a business, there is a lot of money involved, and you do need to be able to read a business spreadsheet, understand what governance's role is, etc. and my skills in getting things done and concentrating on outcomes. I'm trying to think what else there is. I've done the Institute of Directors governance course and experience in governing groups. So I guess that makes a difference. So I don't have a party political agenda either. I have a I think I mentioned the Dunedin agenda and that focus on action and accountability, because I've sat there trying for 3 years to be focused on delivering what we say we're going to deliver, and I'd really like to see that happen.
Sophie Barker, if people want to find out more about you in the next month leading up to the election, it's sophieformayor.com. Go read up all about Sophie Barker. Hey, thanks for chatting with us today. It's been enlightening. I've enjoyed chatting to you.
Oh, you can catch up with me another time. I'll tell you some more ghost stories.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we'll do, a ghost story special, and you can come on and tell us all about them. Hey, best of luck for the next, I guess, 4 or 5 weeks, as I'm wishing everybody the same. Best of luck. And I know it's going to be a busy time for you all. Good luck with the run up to the election. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Pat. And thanks so much for the opportunity and for your time as well.